Welcome to the podcast, Let the Prophet Speak. Today we continue our study of the Book of Kings, the first Book of Kings, that's Melachim Aleph, chapter 6. We're going to complete chapter 6 today with 6b. And we ended yesterday with, we had learned of the basic structure, in other words, the structure of the building itself, the size and what it was made out of, and we learned of the Yitzia, which were the rooms that were built along the outer perimeter of the basic building, and then we heard from God, who spoke to Shlomo and told him that this house is great, but the bottom line is how you behave and how you act. And this house and you as a king will last only as long as you act in accordance with my laws and accordance with the way I have taught you to act, which we will see, unfortunately, as history unfolds, was not really kept very well. But anyway, here we are at verse 14. We're going to continue. There's going to be a lot of details here. I'll try to point out little points here and there as they come up. But for the most part, if you're really interested in the details and the structure of the building, I recommend any of the many books out there that have diagrams and pictures that can show you what exactly these structures may have looked like. Vayiven Shlomo et habayit vayichaleu. So Shlomo built the house and he completed it. So again, this is, we had said this already before he completed it. This seems to kind of surround the words of when God spoke to Shlomo and said he completed it. God spoke to Shlomo, and it reminds us this is where we were up to, that he completed the basic structure of the building. Now he continues to build within the basic structure, to build it up. So what is happening? Vayiven et kirot habayit mi baita b'tzalot arozim mikarka habayit ad kirot hasipun. He paneled the walls of the house with planks of cedar, and he overlaid the walls on the inside with wood. Tzipa eitz mi bayis, they were completely covered with wood from the inside. Vayitzaf et karka habayit b'tzalot b'roshim, and the floor of the house was also the floor paneling was also wood. So the floor tiles so much were like tiled with cedar planks. So one would get the impression from walking in that it was built of wood. Vayiven et esrim amma miyarkisei habayit b'tzalot arozim, and he built the 20 amot from the back of the house. So in other words, one would walk in on one side in the front of the rectangle and looking towards the back, if you measured from the back wall 20 amot b'tzalot arozim in a karka kirot, he built a partition also made out of cedar. So within the house, this wall, vayiven lo mibayit lidvir, and this wall was what separated the heichal, the hall, the great hall, from the devir, which was the holy of holies, l'kodesh hakodeshim, for a holy of holies. V'arboim bo amohoy habayis hu heichal lifnai. And then the remaining 40 amot was the great hall of the heichal, in which were placed the other main articles of worship, meaning the shulchan, the table, and the menorah with the lights, and the inner mizbeach, the inner altar, the one where the ketoret, the mizbeach haketoret, where the incense was brought. So, and within the kodesh hakodeshim, we're going to learn was where the Aron Kodesh, the Ark of the Covenant, would be kept. The erez al habayit penima, and the cedar of the inside of the house. This is referring to the entire inside. Was miklat pikaim, was carvings of pikaim, are like vegetables or gourds or peturei tzitzim, and all kinds of designs. Hakol erez, all within the cedar. So it seems like they were carved into the wall, or some learned they were drawn in pictures upon the walls. But either way, it was this beautiful decoration that covered the entire inside. So the wooden paneling on the walls was not just wood, but it was covered with either pictures or it was covered with carvings. Ein even nira, so one could not see any stone when one would walk in. It would one see only the wooden carvings. Udevir b'toch habayit miprima heichin, and all the way on the inside was the devir, was the Holy of Holies, like we mentioned 2 verses ago. L'titain sham, the purpose was to put in there at Aron Brit Adonai, the Ark of the Covenant of God, representing the covenant between God and His people. V'lifnei hadvir, and before the dvir, or within the dvir, inside, Eser Mama Orech, Veser Mama Rochav, it was 20 by 20, Veser Mama Komaso by 20. It was a perfect cube of 20 cubits and so on. By Tzapeu Zahav Sogur, and it was completely covered with gold. By Yitzav Mizbeach Arez, and he similarly covered the Mizbeach as well, the altar as well, which was built of cedar. He covered that with gold as well, the Mizbeach being the altar. We're at verse 20 now, and this, presumably, Rashi explains to us, this altar is referring to the inner altar. The outer altar was not made of gold. This is the inner altar, the one which was in the Great Hall in the Heichal. And the entire house was covered then with gold. Vaya'aber biratukot zahav lefnei hadvir, and he placed golden chains in front of the devir, in front of the Holy of Holies, and he covered them with gold. It's all this is. It's hard to imagine exactly how this was. This is a description, but like I said, there are various books out there that try to imagine what this may have looked like. And then the entire house was covered with gold until he completed covering the entire house with gold. And the Mizbeach, which was in front of the Devir, in front of the Holy of Holies, was also covered with gold. Now, this is interesting. Verse 23. He made two cherubs, right? That their base was made out of olive wood, Eser Amot Komoto, which were 10 Amot high. So these are 15 feet tall. These are very large cherubs. These are in addition, of course, to the cherubs that we know about from the Torah, which are on top of the Aron Kodesh, on the top of the Ark of the Covenant. This is something, again, that Shlomo is making on his own. This is something that we don't see any commandment to do this, but these are two additional cherubs. B'chamesh amot kinaf hakruv ha'echot, and one of those had, each wing was 5 amot long, presumably to the tip. V'chamesh amot kinaf hakruv hashenit, and the second one was also, so each wing was 5 amot, that's about 7.5 feet. Eser amot miktzos knafav vad ktzos knafav, and if you went from wingtip to wingtip, it would be 10 amos completely. V'eser ba'amot hakruv hasheni mida achas v'ketzev achad l'shnei akruvim, and the wing spread of the other kruv, of the other cherub, was the same. Each one had the same exact measurements. Komat hakruv achad eser ba'amot machen hakruv hasheni, each one had the same height. It was also 10 amot high. Vayitenet akruvim b'toch habayit hapnimi, and he put these cherubs, these kruvim, within the inner house. Inside the, in other words, the Devir, the Kodesh HaKodeshim, the Holy of Holies. Vayifursu et kanfei akruvim, and they spread out the wings of these cherubs, of the kruvim. Vatiga knafa echad bakir, and one wing touched the wall. Knafa kruv hasheni nogas bakir hasheni, and the other one touched the other wall. Remember, because it was 20 amot high. V'kanfeihem al toch bayit nogot kanaf al kanaf, and the wings within it touched wing to wing. Now, this is hard to imagine, because if it was 10 amot wingtip to wingtip, and there's a lot of issues with these measurements here, and each one was 5, well, what about the measurement of the cherub itself? It would, unless you say the wings came out of the back, so the base of the wings was touching each other on the backs of the cherubs. That would be one way of understanding that. And also, were those, exactly how they were standing, how they were situated, is very difficult to understand. It sounds on one hand that they may have been, the wings were kind of curved forward, and other understandings that it sounds like they were spread straight out, so that it would be 10 amot from tip to tip. So as like in the famous saying from the Talmud from the rabbis is that there are all of these possibilities are true, and that that when and they represented the people. In other words, when the people were being good, the cherubs would be arching their wings towards each other and like in an embrace and facing each other. When the people were bad, they would turn their backs to each other and face the other way, and the wings would no longer be spreading toward each other and facing each other. But that's a beautiful thought and idea, but exactly how Shlomo laid these out is very difficult, and I'm not going to spend too much time trying to tease out these words to come up with my understanding. There's a lot of different understandings, and you're welcome to do that research on your own. Vayitzafet ekruvim zahav, although they were made of olive wood, he covered them in gold. V'et kol kirot habayit meisav kola pituchei miklaot kruvim v'timorot, and all over the walls of the house, right? And were covered with these carvings, or also could be understood as pictures, as drawings, but it probably means carvings, which of the shapes of kruvim, of cherubs, v'timorot, and palm trees, u'pturei tzitzim, and other designs, milifnim v'lachitzon, on the inner and the outer areas. But karka bayit zahav, and the floor of it he covered with gold, lepnima v'lachitzon, on the inside and outside. So it was carved into the wood, and it was all wood, but the wood was overlaid with a golden covering. The petach hadvir, and the opening, the entrance to the devir of the Holy of Holies, asa daltot atzei, and he made doorways out of olive wood, ha'ayel mezuzot chamishit, right? With the pilasters, meaning what holds the doors up on the doorposts, having 5 different sides. Ushnei daltot atzei shemen v'kola alehem, and the double doors were made out of olive wood, and there was again carvings upon them, miklot kruvim v'timorot v'tzitzim, the same designs as before, and it was also overlaid with gold, v'tzipa zahav, v'yard al hakruvim al timorot v'yatzat zahav, and the upon these designs and these carvings, the gold was placed upon it. V'chein asa lepetach ha'hechal mezuzot atzei shemen, and to the doors of the hechal, the doors of the great hall, right, which was, you'd enter into the hechal and then you'd enter into the devir. There was also had doorposts, mezuzot atzei shemen, also made of olive wood, me'et revi'etz, and they had 4 sides. So seemingly when it said before 5 sides, it means that the posts that held the doors were like a pentagon shaped, and this one is 4 side, meaning it's like a square shaped post. Ushtei daltot atzei beroshim, and the 2 doors that were made of cypress wood, shnei tzlaim, each one had rounded planks upon the doors, so they were glilim, like they were kind of rounded in such a way. The kolah kruvim v'timorot u'p'treitzim, the same designs were carved into these doors. V'tzipa zahav, they were also covered in gold, miyushar al mechukeh, and the gold was spread out evenly across the entire carved area. Vayiven et hachatzer ha'pnimit, and he made the inner enclosure, the inner chatzer, the inner yard, shlosha turei gazit v'tor kirutot arazim, 3 courses or lines, rows of cut stones, v'tur, and 1 line of cut wood. So this is and this was out in the chatzer, in the yard. Okay, so this is all these structures, and remember, like I said, I'm not going into the details of all of this, but one gets the sense, and the main thing is one gets the sense of this house of tremendous grandeur, a house with incredible work of art, with all of the carvings and the gold, and the size and the impressiveness of the building. One just has to imagine, especially in those days, but even in our times, walking into such a building must have been quite an incredibly impressive experience, and all as would be fitting for a temple dedicated to God. So Bashana HaRevi'it, it was in the fourth year, Yusad Beit Adonai, that the foundations were laid, that the building began B'Yerach Ziv, in the month of Ziv, the month of Shine, right? Which we said before, all the way back in the beginning of this chapter. It was in the month of Ziv, the second month, when it started. Ziv meaning to shine. Ubashana ha'achas esrei, and in the 11th month, which would be the month of Cheshvan, I'm sorry, I made a mistake. Not the 11th month. In the 11th year, B'Yerach Bul, in the month called Bul. Again, this is another name for a month. One gets the sense that Shlomo named the months, but we don't know all of those names. We only know so far Ziv and Bul, right? Hu Chodesh Hashmini, which is the eighth month of the year, which nowadays we would call in Hebrew Cheshvan, the 8th month in the Hebrew calendar. Those days, Shlomo had named that month Bul, which is the 8th month. So this is then very much in the autumn time of year. Usually would fall out corresponding on the secular calendar to the month of November or so, somewhere around there. Kol HaBayit, in that month it was completed. So that's L'chol Dvarav, L'chol Mishpatav, in all of its ways and all of its specifications and details. By Yivneu Sheva Shanim, and it took him 7 years to build the entire house. So now we have learned that the entire process took 7 years, and when it started, when it ended. The month of Bul, I just make a quick mention, the various understandings of why it was named Bul. I'll just mention the explanation of Rashi, that Bul refers to the food given to animals. Vayabel is to give fodder, to give food to donkeys, as mentioned in other places. So so the language Bul would mean the time when they bring the fodder, the animal food in from the field. The time, basically, when we bring in the bales of hay, that would be the month of Bul, and that's why that month has the name Bul. Now, this concludes chapter 6. A lot of details, a lot of issues of the structure of the building and so on, but still interesting nonetheless. And in the next chapter, we're going to continue with some more building, and we're going to try to point out some of the ideas being conveyed as much as possible as we go through the building. Thank you so much for studying chapter 6 together with me. Looking forward to studying chapter 7 and, of course, the rest of the book of Kings together.